Hi there, I'm Laura Blood, the Environmental Education Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Resources Council. I'm happy you're here to learn more about household chemicals and how we can reduce them in our own homes. You're also going to learn some insights into what we do with those chemicals after we collect them at collection events, let you know kind of what to expect at a collection event, and then give you some resources for how you can reduce those chemicals in the first place. PRC is one of the oldest grassroots organizations in Pennsylvania. We were founded in 1939. Our focus has really been on waste reduction. We do household chemical collection events, educational workshops. We have a traveling glass bin program and zero waste services and much, much more. Our focus is really on creating circular economies. As you can see from the illustration, we would like to keep materials in a cycle instead of having a take, make, and dispose model. So let's talk a little bit more about household chemicals. So PRC has two offices. We have one in Pittsburgh and the others in Philadelphia. So we're a statewide organization. We have 9 events, household chemical collection events across the state. And we also have contracted with the city of Pittsburgh to almost double that number. And we have been able to accomplish that work with only 3 full-time staff and an amazing group of volunteers. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about what household hazardous waste is and why we care about it, some details about how to register for a household chemical collection event. We're going to answer your top 3 questions about collection events and how they're organized and what to expect, provide some resources for disposal, and how you can reduce household chemicals before they pile up. So household hazardous waste are all the products in our homes, such as our cleaning products, automotive fluids, batteries, light bulbs, and paints that pose a risk to either human or environmental health. There are things like hobby glues, nail polishes, and our lawn and garden pesticides. And we will be providing some resources at the end of the presentation for where you can properly dispose of medications and medical waste. We wanted to provide a note on electronics since they're also considered hazardous waste. So electronics are regulated and handled slightly differently than household chemicals and are covered under another regulation called the CDRA, or Covered Device Recycling Act. They're not collected at most household chemical collection events. So PRC has separate collection events for electronics. So household chemicals are important to dispose of properly since they impact both our physical and environmental health. According to 2023 data from the Poison Control Center, the largest percentage of poisonings, about 19.2%, are from household cleaning substances and cosmetics or personal care products. The rest are divided between painkillers, foreign bodies, dietary supplements, vitamins, ointments, and pesticides and plants. So environmental justice areas or low-income communities of color are those communities that are likely to have less resources and thus less opportunities to dispose of household hazardous waste properly. In addition, environmental justice communities typically have greater social stressors, which makes them even more vulnerable than others to the health impacts of environmental exposures. I also wanted to bring up fires at recycling facilities. Those are increasing. According to data from the EPA, 245 battery fires have occurred in the past 7 years from 2013 to 2020. And of those fires that were at waste facilities, like materials, recycling facilities, or MRFs, 78% of them had to call emergency responders. Battery fires are hard to put out, and they often have something called thermal runaway and often reignite. So these battery fires can also cause toxic fluorine gases to be emitted from a common flammable electrolyte used, lithium hexafluorophosphate. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about some impacts to our pets. Pesticides can be harmful to wildlife and to our pets. Uh, Pyrethroids or permethrin has also found to be harmful to humans, and certain pesticides have been linked to bee population declines as well. Let's talk about environmental health. So, a watershed is an area of land that drains into a stream or lake. And anything we pour down either our drains at home or a storm drain either flows directly to a stream or river or flows to a wastewater treatment plant. In either case, those chemicals can have detrimental effects, especially those that are impactful at small quantities, such as endocrine disruptors, BPA, dioxin, and forever chemicals. There's also things like heavy metals that can bioaccumulate in the bodies of aquatic animals and cause issues there as well. Illegal dumping can be an issue if rain comes down and flows through much of that garbage and causes chemicals to leach from it and get into the waterways by flowing through runoff into those rivers and streams as well. Now you know the impacts to public health and the environment of household chemicals, and you want to do the right thing. So go get your fanny pack, keep listening, and we'll learn how to prepare for PRC's household chemical collection events. So one of our first steps to prepare for a collection event is just to take stock of all the chemicals and to understand what is on the labels. So we're going to talk about some things you might want to look at the label in the next slide. You want to understand really what materials are accepted at the collection event, which we will go over that as well. Check for any leaky containers. We don't want any containers that are leaking. Also, please make sure those labels are readable. You're going to want to put all your chemicals in a container or some kind of box. And then when you're transporting them to the collection event in your vehicle, just make sure that everything is secure and that it's well ventilated. So this slide provides some words that are often on chemical labels that you can use to help determine if you should bring it to a household chemical collection event. So things like poison, warning, corrosive, toxic, or danger. We wanted to provide a few notes on chemical storage. So try not to stockpile your chemicals and keep them in their original container so that they have all of their labels in the precautionary language. Try to keep them sealed tightly, keep all the lids in place, and store them in a cool, dry place away from children, pets, and food. You will want to separate the flammables and corrosives and poisons from other materials and perhaps place them on separate shelves. Also, keep chlorine and chlorine-containing chemicals away from vinegar, alcohol, and WD-40, as these can create mustard gas, chloroform, and can also be explosive. Store flammable gases in a well-ventilated area and corrosive substances in a leak-proof cabinet, isolated from those other chemicals if you can. Also, make sure to ensure proper airflow and ventilation and maintain moderate temperatures and humidity levels if you can. So now that we've talked about how to store chemicals, here's a simplified key of the kinds of materials that you can bring to a household collection event. So cleaners, automotive fluids, light bulbs, aerosol cans, and paint. We'll talk a little bit more detail about other alternatives for handling paint in a few slides. So pesticides and fertilizers, pool chemicals, drain cleaners, batteries, vapes, smoke detectors, mercury thermometers, and small empty gas cylinders are all accepted. PRC can't accept medical waste or medications, fluorescent bulbs, pressurized gas cylinders that are greater than 20 pounds, electronics, ammunition, or tires. For a complete list of items that we can accept and that we can't accept, you can pause and refer to this slide. This information is also available on our website. Since we talked about battery fires earlier, let's give them a little bit more attention. When you're stockpiling batteries at home, consider taping the terminal ends of all rechargeable batteries and any others that are larger than 12 volts. So taping the exposed terminals of batteries, or alternatively, you can bag them, can help prevent the battery from rubbing against other batteries, metals, or potentially flammable materials, which could result in fires, personal injury, or other damage. So duck, electrical, or packing tape are all really good options in addition to a clear Ziploc bags. You would want to avoid masking, painters, or gift wrapping tape. If you have lithium ion batteries that are physically damaged or bulging, corroding, or visibly leaking, they should be separately stored in kitty litter. You can call an organization, which is called Call to Recycle, for a damaged, defective, and recalled transport kit. So all rechargeable batteries need to be protected. So this includes nickel cadmium, nickel metal hydride, nickel zinc, lithium ion, and small sealed lead acid batteries. And in addition, any battery over 12 volts. Lithium-based batteries pose a potential risk when they're not properly protected, as witnessed by the number of fires at material recovery facilities that we've seen across the country. So this list of the types of batteries, which was developed by an organization called Call to Recycle, is just here to spark your brain into thinking about all the items that might contain rechargeable batteries so that you can think about where you might need to go around and collect any batteries that you would like to recycle at the collection event. We wanted to provide a special note on latex paints. Latex paints can be dried and put into the trash. It is our most common and most heavy item that is brought to our household's collection events, and we can save a lot of time, a lot of disposal costs, and a lot of your disposal costs if we can dispose of that in the trash. So think about either drying it out, or you can also donate it to schools or places of worship. There are also some organizations that you can donate paint to, and they will remix it and resell it. Now it's time to register for a collection event. On PRC's website, there is a list of upcoming household chemical collection events. If you click on the event that works for you, it will bring you to an Eventbrite site. On Eventbrite, you will see a whole description of that event. Please make sure to read that description carefully, as there may be certain items that are different than our typical collection events. For instance, the one that's on the slide not only includes household chemicals, but it includes tires as well. And there may be some additional instructions for additional materials. As you can see also, the price for registration is free. Please know that there is still a cost for disposal. It's $20 for every 10 gallons or 50 pounds of material that's assessed on site. There's also a $12 per fire extinguisher and $15 per pounds of liquid mercury, as those two items are more difficult to dismantle and to handle. In addition, PRC only has a permit from the DEP for small business quantities of household chemicals, so we are not able to accept large quantities of materials. PRC offers their tickets in 30-minute time increments. That's so that we can more easily control the flow of traffic. If you don't know exactly what time you're going to be able to come, or you come a little early or a little late, we will still honor your ticket. So please don't register for more than one time slot so that we can make sure that that ticket is available for someone else. If you have any trouble with registration, please reach out to us and we can get you registered over the phone. We will need your name, your email address, your phone number, and your address. If you register online, there's also additional survey questions that ask for things like race and gender, but they are not required. Once you have registered, you will get a confirmation email that will include a QR code and a calendar invite. It will also tell you that you need to print out your ticket. You do not need to print out your ticket. Once you check in at the event, we can look up your information with just your last name, or we can also scan the QR code from your phone. If you realize you can't make it to the event, please reach out to us so that we can cancel your registration and open up that slot for someone else. If you have any problems or concerns, please reach out to us and we can answer those questions and get you registered. Now that you're registered, let's go over what you can expect once you come to our event. Let's load up. Like we talked about previously, make sure all the labels are on your materials. You have those materials in a box or a bin that has lots of ventilation, and everything is nice and secure. So if you need to stop suddenly, things will be secure, and there's also no leaking containers. The next step is to find the line, get checked in, and wait. There will be someone who comes up to your vehicle to check you in. They will be asking for your last name. Remember, you don't need to have your ticket printed out in order for us to get you checked in. However, we can turn you away if you haven't registered and are not on our list. Typical wait times average about 20 to 30 minutes, but can range anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, so plan accordingly. Everyone who is in line and has registered by the end time of the event will have their materials unloaded. You will next be driving up to a trunk check station where someone will ask you to open up your trunk so that they can make an assessment of the materials that you've brought. Note that the volume of material in the containers will be assessed. For example, you won't be charged for 1 gallon of paint if the paint can is only half full. We'll only count that as half a gallon. We will then put that information on a piece of paper along with an assessment of how much your disposal costs will be, and we'll give that information to you to carry to the next payment station. So you will next drive your piece of paper with your disposal costs written on it to the payment station. PRC takes cash, check, or credit card on site, and we will provide a receipt. You'll get the most bang for your buck if you have a full 10 gallons or 50 pounds of materials. So if you only have a little bit you'd like to dispose of, maybe talk to friends or family or neighbors to see if they have some that you could consolidate together and bring in one carload as one participant. After paying, you will enter what's called the hot zone, which is the most sensitive area in a collection event. It's called the hot zone because only permitted staff who have been specially trained in how to handle household chemicals are permitted in that area and must be the ones that handle the chemicals that are in your vehicle, which is why we request that you don't leave your vehicle and remain inside at all times. Any containers that you would like returned to you will be returned to you after your materials have been unloaded. Let's answer the 3 most common questions we get about our household chemical collection events. I love disposing of my household chemicals. Why can't I do it more often? There's only one collection event near me per year. That's a pretty common question that we hear. One of the reasons has to do with that hot zone that we talked about in the last slide. So only very specially trained staff can handle those hazardous chemicals. In addition, those hazardous chemicals have to be brought to a very specifically permitted facility. There aren't a whole lot of those facilities in the area, and those two things really limit how often PRC is able to provide those services. I love disposing of my household chemicals, but I already spent all this money on them. Why do I have to spend money on disposing of them too? This is ridiculous. So this is a question we often get as well. And as we alluded to in the last few slides, disposal costs include those specially trained staff. Then those trained staff have to transport the material to a specially permitted facility where that material is recycled, reused, or treated. Based on that graph that you see on the left, the average cost per person is about $84.50, and that's based on 9 household hazardous collection events that we had in 2024. However, only 30% of that is $27 is actually paid by each participant. The other 70% is taken care of through grant funding, which is great that we can subsidize that much of the cost through grants. However, we can do better. So PRC has plans for a permanent center for hard to recycle materials, or CHARM. So let's learn about that. If PRC had a Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, or CHARM facility, we could offer these services more often and make more efficient use of funding. So this figure shows the total number of pounds of both household hazardous waste and electronic waste collected annually by 3 facilities. One of them is Westmoreland Cleanways, the second is Lancaster County Solid Waste Management, and the third being PRC. And as you can see from the graph, the Lancaster County collects over 2 million pounds of waste. Westmoreland Cleanways collects roughly 1.7 million pounds compared to PRC, which only collects 580,000 pounds through our collection events, which is only a third of what the permanent facilities are able to collect. So we also wanted to look at participation for each of those facilities. And participation rates for permanent facilities are 11 to 20 times higher than PRC's participation rate, which is calculated as the total number of annual vehicles divided by the total number of households in the county. So with significantly higher participation rates, the 2 permanent facilities also collect 3 to 4 times the weight of material for every dollar they use to run their operation. So this is significant considering that the annual operating budgets of PRC, Lancaster County, and Westmoreland are roughly the same at about $535,000 to $600,000 annually. So PRC could spend the same money more efficiently and serve more people and recycle more material if we had a permanent facility. In order to provide you with some more information on participation rates, PRC's household chemical collection events represent less than 1% participation of Allegheny County residents annually based on data from 2023, compared to those other permanent facilities that we talked about in the previous slides, which are able to serve 8 to 14% of their residents and then steadily increase as the program matures. Now, PRC would still have to provide a pop-up style collection event since both the vendors and transportation to the specially permitted facility is still required. However, we could have those collection events more often if we had a permanent facility. And the logistics and planning costs would decrease since we would no longer have to coordinate with a specific venue. So it's a much more efficient use of funding, and it would allow us to be able to have collection events more often. So if you're interested in learning more detail and signing a letter of support, please go to prc.org/charm support. I love disposing of my household chemicals, but wait a second, what happens to them? So, in order to answer that question, we evaluated one event in Allegheny County in South Park in September of 2024, where we collected 59,153 total pounds of material. Keep in mind that our average is typically about 41,000 pounds. 88% of that material was either recycled or reused. So recycling means that it becomes part of the process of another product. So that process does include using some materials as fuel in the boilers used to make cement and asphalt. This type of incineration is regulated differently since it's used to make another material and less virgin fuel has to be used to create those materials. Now, another 10% go through a treatment process, which typically means that acids and bases are neutralized and then sent to an in-house treatment process that is permitted. The facility is called Reserve Environmental Services in Ashtabula, and compliance reports can be assessed online. The last 2% is incinerated and only allowed if the material can't be recycled, reused, or treated enough to eliminate any danger to health or the environment. So these items are things like pesticide solids, some poisons, reactive solids, and foam aerosols. So the only material typically sent to a landfill is asbestos or asbestos-bearing materials. Latex paint is reblended and sent to an organization called Matthew 25 Ministries. Gas cylinders are sent to cylinder companies. They are tested and refilled and put back on the market, and batteries are sent to a battery recycler. We wanted to provide a few resources and some tips for prevention. So you can find a map of drug take-back locations for any medications. There are also several services which will redistribute used medical equipment like crutches and wheelchairs. So some examples of that are Global Links in West Mifflin. Here's some resources for electronics disposal in addition to PRC's electronics collection events. So check out Best Buy, Evolution E-Cycling, and Staples, which often have different rules for what they accept. So make sure when you go to their websites that you carefully read exactly what they accept, when they accept it, and then if they have any other special rules. Always check with your municipality and your hauler. They will often be able to supply collection events or more information about where you can recycle hard to recycle, household chemical, or electronic materials. Here are a couple additional quick resources to check out. If you're in the Allegheny County area, you can look into their recycling drop-off binder. You can either enter what you're trying to recycle or your address to come up with a list of facilities in the area that might take those types of materials. If you're looking for a broader resource, Earth 911 is great. They're national and it works the same way where you can either enter in what material you're looking for or where you live, and they'll give you all kinds of resources for how to take care of that. We can see from this figure how our recycled, incinerated, and disposed of household chemicals fit into what's called a waste hierarchy. We can see that if we're able to reduce our household chemical use, we will have the greatest impacts on human and environmental health. So let's focus a little bit more on that first block. We can reduce our household chemicals by only buying what we need, reading and following the labels to make sure that we're only using the amount that we need, and buying recycled and non-toxic options. Also, trying to replace some of those hazardous chemicals with non-hazardous alternatives. So let's look at a few options for how we can do that. You can use your own non-toxic cleaners by using things like baking soda and vinegar. PRC has a list of recipes on our website. In addition, you can also look for the Safer Choice label when you're out shopping. That is a program that was developed by the EPA, and it looks at all the different chemicals in a product. Each product is required to pass performance testing and gets audited every 3 years. So it's a great option. Couple notes to help us reduce household chemicals related to the yard and garden is to test your soil before you treat. Places like Penn State Extension will provide a soil test kit, which can give you a soil profile and fertilizer recommendations, making sure that you're only using the chemicals that you need and the amounts that you need them. You can also consider fertilizing organically. In addition, there is a 2022 Pennsylvania turf grass fertilizer law, which does limit phosphorus and when it can be used. For instance, you're only allowed to apply it outside before December 15th or after March 1st, and it can't be used within 15 feet of a wetland or a body of water, and also can't be applied to an impervious surface such as a driveway. Other recommendations are to mow high and leave those grass clippings because they provide all kinds of nutrients, which precludes the need for fertilizer. You may want to plant natives. They also don't require as much maintenance and chemicals. Think about alternatives for chemicals and pesticides such as neem oil and integrated pest management. Here are a few other resources you can use that may have more information on disposal of hazardous chemicals and how to safely store chemicals in your home.